There's a lot of interesting dynamics, psychological dynamics that go on in martial arts that are very similar to just like psychology terms as well. So like things like projection, because when you're going into a space where you're very vulnerable, or that you should be going into where you're very vulnerable, you have this fight between your true self and your ego, you could say. And then this is one thing I noticed. So when you go to this, if you go to a dojo and then you're kind of like the first person there, and there's all these other people there again training, their different belt ranks and everything, they're going to project things onto you, and you're going to project thoughts onto them through your ego to protect yourself from kind of being vulnerable, right? So maybe there might be like an air of gossip, and I think that's what that really is. When the ego gets in the way of true self-development, there is like this air of gossip that develops, which is kind of features people's attempts to avoid uh, judgment, so that they then become like attackers of people's kind of like you kind of like have attackers and defenders within that kind of air of gossip. Like so, for example, let's say you went into a dojo or whatever, and you're a new guy, and then there's these other people with higher belt ranks, and their ego or their identity is attached to that ranking, which is the difficulty of the whole progression of the martial arts stuff. They might like start picking on that one person who's like, oh, he's a newbie, or he's this, he's probably not very good, or whatever, or maybe there might be this kind of tension, or in the situation of someone going to the gym, ego lifting, that's kind of like someone trying to defend their own ego from judgment, uh, from the gaze of other people. Because they're like, oh, I'm going to try and really lift heavy, but they can't really lift it in good form. But they're trying to defend their ego from the judgment of other people, because the other people, that person might be feeling within that air of gossip that, oh, those other people are looking at me and they're judging me, thinking that I'm weak or whatever. So you have the ego lifters who are like trying to, like, oh, I want to try and prove myself to other people, even though it's not adequate, it's not authentic, it's not authentic communication. So it's like there's this interesting dynamic of gossip that you're contending with within doing kind of like athleticism or martial arts, that you have to work through. And it's always going back to humility, because as soon as the ego, if it gets in the way of any of these things, it basically cuts off your progress of actually developing any skills. So like if your ego gets in the way of doing martial arts, it cuts off your ability to develop your skills, because you're not going to be vulnerable to learn new ways of defense, new kind of ways of taking people down, chokeholds, submissions. You're not going to learn new ways of doing things because you have a certain belt rank that might be higher than the other people in the dojo, or you might just develop this kind of air of confidence which isn't at the level of what the black belt is. Like, because you have the white belts and then you have the black belts, and it's like the only difference between a white belt and a black belt is just the fact that they just showed up every day. Like there isn't really anything else. And I think that's also the progression of learning martial arts, is dealing with uh is the practice of always falling back into vulnerability, and develop that how that is the only way to really develop your skills, because you can only learn because you're being taught by a sensei, you're being taught by someone who's got a black belt who has a lot of experience. As soon as you start identifying with certain movements that you commit to when trying to do grappling with someone, and you develop habits, and then you don't keep yourself vulnerable in situations like that, then you're going to consistently cut yourself off from further development, I think. And I think that's the big thing with that is it always comes back to vulnerability, learning to be humble, always coming back to humility and vulnerability with that stuff.